This is a presentation of OneLogin Training.
To managing OneLogin, our final part, part 5. OneLogin tracks all types of events, user logins, when users are added to roles or added applications, when objects like directory connectors are created or modified. You can view all the events from the activity menu. From there, you can filter based upon which user this event is relating to, event type, or even risk score. The risk score is related to a OneLogin feature called Smart Factor Authentication. If this feature is enabled, risk scores would reflect how close a user's login attempt is to their usual login behavior. So if they're logging in from the same machine, the same time of day, the same browser, etc., that's their typical behavior, then the risk score would be quite low. The closer it is to 0, basically, the closer their login behavior is to their normal login behavior. The higher the score, the less likely it is to be close to their normal behavior. You can also configure OneLogin to basically publish its events to same systems out there like Sumo Logic or Splunk. Those systems tend to have much more robust reporting capabilities, querying capabilities, even built-in visual sort of graphs that you can use to analyze your events. Now, there's also one other kind of fun method that one can use to view particular events, and that's actually to kind of futz with the URL itself. So you can start off with your basic OneLogin, subdomain.onelogin.com, and then /events ? And so the query parameters basically that you pass in here can control event types that you see, and even if you look down there at the bottom, you can do things like play with how many events per page, how many pages do we want to see. You can do the filtering by user, so any of those filtering options that we saw in the main event viewer are also available by manipulating these query parameters. So again, a little easier to be this specific if you're using some sort of SIM solution. However, if you don't have that, this is a fun alternative. So let's take a quick look at basic event viewer, how we might search for certain types of events, and even how we might want to play with that URL query parameter option there. All right, let's go take a look at that event viewer. Again, administration, UI. I'm going to go to the activity window, and it is the first option underneath that menu. So again, I got some filtering capabilities within the event viewer itself, where I can choose various event types here from this drop down. It'll filter what I'm seeing here. I could go and combine this with maybe a user ID. I want anything related to my buddy Brian here. So I have lots of sort of filtering capabilities out of the box. As I said, you could use SIM system to help out with this, like Splunk or Sumo Logic. You can also sort of play with your own URLs. So here's an example of a custom URL I can build together. So event type 601, pages 2, risk scores or anything like that I don't want in there. So in fact, the minimum that I need in order to generate this is just that event type ID there. So it just kind of gives me a nice way of customizing the URL myself. Obviously, I don't memorize these event type IDs, so our developer site actually has them all listed out. So we can see, 601 was the app was updated by some sort of user. 602 is app was removed by the user. Let's see if we have any of those event types here. So I can just change this to a 2 and hit enter and see what comes up. In fact, I do have a few of them. So Again, I've got some customizing capabilities with this, much easier with more robust event system like a sim system. Again, Sumo Logic, Splunk, two main ones that we would recommend, but and or just explore some of the Phaeton capabilities that are out of the box. Now, certain processes that OneLogin runs, such as reapplying those mappings to users, are actually run in the background and are called jobs. So guess what? There is a job monitor. So you can go to the job monitor and see when did we last reapply mappings, or other types of jobs like provisioning, applying bulk operations, uploading a bunch of users via CSV file, even doing the little refresh entitlements piece that we mentioned during provisioning, where we go query the application for the values we can assign to users and pull that information into OneLogin. So the job viewer itself, or monitor, you can see underneath the same activity menu that we can see our events. So here we can see, job that's currently in process, like reapplying mappings, how many users it's already applied to, and if you catch it fast enough, you can click on the little square over there on the right and it will stop the job from running. Mostly what we're going to do, jobs monitor, is just see status, like what completed, what's currently running, what failed, things along those lines we could find here within the job monitor. One thing I cannot do is restart jobs from this job monitor. So if I had come along and stopped that mappings from being reapplied, then I couldn't come back in here and restart the job or even resume it from where I stopped it. I would basically have to trigger it to start the same way that I triggered it to start the original time. So that would be by me clicking on, for example, reapply mappings from the main mappings page, or I did it on a particular user, something along those lines. But I'd have to go back through whatever steps triggered this particular process to occur. I cannot restart or resume jobs from here. I am basically looking here for status as well as maybe any errors that have occurred. So lastly, sometimes you might ask yourself, which users are part of which roles? Who's logging in when? Any questions along these lines? You want some answers? Reports are a great place to start. So again, you can find all the reports or start creating reports from that handy dandy activity menu. And from there, you can access a bunch of standard reports that are built into the platform, and or start creating your own report kind of from scratch using our custom report capabilities. So standard reports are pretty much what you see here. These are ones that come out of the box. I can see who's accessing which application. I can see who's unlicensed. I can see who's been assumed access as within the last 3 months. So again, I always recommend when you start looking at the reports, browse around at the existing reports. They might get you exactly what you need. Usually, however, maybe they're not quite exactly what you need, but if you got to tweak it just a little bit, you'd be closer to what you want. So you do have the ability to clone existing reports. Once you clone a report, then you can modify things like its conditions, which are sort of like its where clause, right? So this particular report is looking for any users that are being that are assuming access as other users. So all assuming users. Thus the logic there is assuming users does not equal blank. And where the event was created on or after 3 months ago. Notice the syntax there. So it's this natural language syntax. You can use things like last week, this week, kind of thing, 3 months ago. You can also put a date in there if you wish, but it's nice to have sort of that, 3 months ago, because the months ago will always sort of change. Okay. And Again, we can modify other options like add or remove columns down there at the bottom. So creating reports and or modifying reports, it's basically got two big old sections here. What are the conditions? So what am I filtering off of? So here we modified the assume user activity last 3 months so that the one who's being assumed is just Barney. So who's been assuming access is Barney, basically here in the last month. That's what we've done to go change this guy. And again, some of those are fun. We can go and change the time conditions to use the little natural language if we wish. Always use a date if you want to. Natural language can be helpful. And again, go and add and or remove columns. So the columns that are included in this particular report are full name, email, and group. You can see that at the bottom. If we want to add in a new column, we just choose it from the drop down where it says add column. It's pretty simple. Okay, to remove a column, choose the drop down arrow next to the column and you'd have the option to remove it. Once we have, filtered the way we want to filter or modify those conditions, once we've chosen the columns we want, then we'd even have options to, sort by particular fields and or group by particular fields. So again, in the drop down next to the column name, that's where I see my sort options and or my grouping options. Now, again, the reports out of the box, those standard reports don't do it for me. Maybe trying to go through that clone process, tweaking them slightly, still not quite doing it for me. I do have the ability to kind of create reports from scratch by clicking on that new report button in the upper right hand corner. When I click on that button, then I'll be presented with what we call these report types. They're basically predefined views, like predefined queries that already have certain amount of information in them, and then you can choose, again, what are the conditions that you want to filter off of? What are the columns of information that you actually want to include? So let's take a look at how to go and browse the existing reports as well as create a brand new report. Finally, let's take a look at our reports. So again, admin UI, activity, and this time I'm going to choose reports. And we can see those standard reports that are part of the system come out of the box. In this case, we have like assumed user activity in the last 3 months, which I do not seem to have a lot of for this particular instance. How about if we go to application access? There we go. So we got a little bit more information there. I can see when Brian logged into Workspace, when my buddy Blake Hatch logged in, Mr. Firewall, etc. Okay. I might be just fine with this particular report. Maybe I want to tweak it slightly. So that's where I can start kind of customizing things by doing a basic clone of one of the existing reports. So let's see, event type, logged in, maybe I'll keep that the same. Maybe I don't want it in the last 3 months, I just want to see the last month. How about some more columns of information here? Like I'd like the app to actually be one of the columns, so maybe I can then group by particular apps. Okay, so now app access in last month. Change that name there. And now I can save this. And I can run it. So I can view the report from here. I can also export the results out to CSV if I want to. Right. But again, I can see I haven't done a bunch in the last month. Brian's the only one who's logged into an actual application. Not a very big demo account at this point, but I've created now a custom report for myself. The other way of creating truly custom reports is to again go to the main reports page and click on new report. And so that's where you'll see one of those report types that we mentioned. And thus, again, you can choose one of those and start building your own set of queries, and then start figuring out what attributes you want to add in. So a couple ways you can go about it. I do recommend, of course, exploring the out-of-the-box reports, those standard reports first, then maybe think about slightly tweaking those by creating clones, and then you can dive into starting a little bit more from scratch with these report types. And this concludes managing OneLogin.
This is a presentation of OneLogin Training.